I was always deeply drawn to anatomy, and I genuinely wanted to be useful to sick people. Therefore, I enrolled in a prestigious medical school in Boston, Massachusetts. This chilling incident happened during my first year of studies, back in the 90s. As medical students, we regularly had practical classes in the university's old underground morgue. We participated in autopsies, practiced dissection, and assisted the senior doctors. On one of those long, exhausting days, toward the late evening, our practical classes finally came to an end. The professor left, and all the students, as usual, headed to the locker room showers attached to the morgue to wash off the heavy, clinging stench of formaldehyde. That evening, I stayed behind a little late. I was putting away my instruments and went to the showers when the rest of the students had already left. I spent about 15 minutes getting cleaned up, changed into my everyday clothes, and headed for the exit. To get to the main stairwell, my path required me to walk back through the large dissection hall. It was a long, freezing room where sheet-covered cadavers lay on the metal tables prepared for tomorrow's examinations. I quickly walked past the silent bodies, trying not to look at them. I reached the heavy metal door leading to the main corridor and pushed down on the handle. It didn't budge. I yanked it harder, but it was locked from the outside. The security guard must have assumed the basement was completely empty and locked everything down for the night. For some time, I aggressively tortured the door handle. Then I started knocking loudly and kicking the heavy metal with my boots, but the old door didn't even flinch. Time passed, and it was getting very late. I pressed my ear against the cold steel, but there were absolutely no sounds, footsteps, or signs of human presence outside. I didn't have a cell phone to call for help, especially since it was the 90s. Panic began to creep into my mind. How could they forget about me? I started screaming, hoping someone on the upper floors would hear me. After losing my voice, I finally realized with horror that there were no living people left in the building, just me and these covered bodies. I tried to calm myself down, deciding I would just have to endure this night and wait for the morning shift. But suddenly, with loud electric click, the industrial fluorescent lights on the ceiling shut off. The building's automatic timer had triggered. The massive hall was plunged into pitch-black darkness. The only source of light now was the faint, eerie greenish glow from the emergency exit sign above the locked door. The thick darkness made the freezing hall feel absolutely suffocating. Finally, accepting my fate, I huddled into the far corner of the room, pulling my knees tightly to my chest. I closed my eyes, deciding to simply kill time by sleeping. The morgue was unnaturally quiet. I had just begun to doze off when the faint sound sliced through the silence. I tensed up, my eyes snapping open in the dark. It sounded like a soft rustle of fabric. I stared into the gloom, my heart racing, but I couldn't see anything moving. I took a deep breath and began to rationalize the fear away. It's just an old building settling, I told myself. It's a ventilation system, or just my sleep-deprived brain playing cruel tricks on me. I waited in tense silence for another 5 minutes. When nothing else happened, the heavy blanket of exhaustion finally took over. I convinced myself it was just a hallucination, rested my head on my knees, and slowly drifted back into a light, uneasy sleep. But I wasn't asleep for long. A sudden, much louder noise jolted me awake. This time, there was absolutely no denying it. It wasn't the building, and it wasn't the wind. It was the distinct sound of heavy plastic sliding against the wet metal. It came directly from one of the autopsy tables in the center of the room. My breathing completely stopped. I peered into the green-lit gloom, my heart beating so hard my ribs physically ached. At first, I didn't see anything, but then I noticed movement. The thick white sheet covering one of the bodies slowly, jerkily slid off the edge and fell onto the floor. I covered my mouth with both hands to keep from screaming out loud. The silhouette of a grown man was slowly sitting up on the stainless steel table. His movements were incredibly stiff and mechanical, as if he was fighting through deep rigor mortis. There was a sickening, wet crunch of popping joints in the silent room. Then, the corpse slowly swung its rigid legs over the edge of the table and slid down. Its bare, dead feet touched the cold tiled floor with a heavy, wet slap. He stood there for a few seconds, swaying slightly, trying to find his balance. And then, the absolute most terrifying thing I could have ever imagined happened. Out of all the vast, dark space in that massive hole, he noticed me cowering in the corner. He slowly turned his head directly toward me. What I saw in the faint, sickly green emergency light was permanently burned into my brain. He had no eyes, just black, gaping eye sockets staring directly into my soul. His pale, stiff jaw was moving up and down, opening and closing silently, as if he was trying to say something to me from beyond the grave. An animalistic, paralyzing fear pinned me entirely to the wall. I blinked hard, praying desperately that it was just a severe sleep paralysis, a horrific, vivid nightmare that I would wake up from. But when I opened my tear-filled eyes, the creature took its first clumsy, dragging step right toward me. He was walking, swinging his arms awkwardly, close in the distance. My survival instinct finally broke the paralyzing spell. I jumped to my feet, let out the loudest, most primal scream of my entire life, and bolted for the heavy metal door. I began pounding on it frantically with both fists, smashing my knuckles against the steel until they bled, sobbing wildly and begging for anyone to help me. I looked over my shoulder in pure panic. The corpse was only a few feet away from me now. Its long, gray, decaying arms were reaching out for my face. The empty eye sockets locked onto mine. Its ice-cold fingers were mere inches away from touching my skin. I squeezed my eyes shut tightly, crying, fully expecting the absolute end. And in that exact terrifying second, the heavy door behind my back crashed wide open. I fell backward into the brightly lit corridor, collapsing right into the arms of the startled night watchman. He had heard my desperate screaming during his routine patrol. The bright beam of his powerful flashlight cut deeply through the darkness of the anatomy lab. I looked back over his shoulder in absolute terror, but the hall was completely empty. There were no standing silhouettes. All of the dead bodies were lying peacefully on their steel tables, tightly and perfectly covered with their white plastic sheets. I spent the rest of the night in the security booth, shivering violently under the warm blanket and drinking liters of hot tea. When I hysterically told the old watchman what I saw, he didn't look surprised at all. He just nodded silently and smirked grimly, as if it wasn't the first time he had heard such a horrifying thing. Despite that living nightmare, I didn't quit medicine. I became a doctor, but since that night, I never, under any circumstances, stay alone in dark rooms.